रंजन यशोदनंदन जन रंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा शील प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा शील प्रभुपादा जय विश्वास परमहंस कवि अष्टोत्तर सदाशिव श्रीमती श्री भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी शील प्रभुपाद की जय। ISKCON संस्थापक शील प्रभुपाद की जय। जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परमहंस अष्टोत्तर सदाशिव श्रीमती भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय। जय विश्वास लघु किशोरदास बाबू महाराज की जय। जय विश्वास सच्चिदानंद श्री भक्तिविनोद ठाकुर की जय। जय विष्णुपाद वैष्णव साहब श्री जगन्नाथ दास बाबू महाराज की जय। जय श्री रूप सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल भट्टदास रघुनाथ गोस्वामी प्रभु की जय। नमाचार्य सरदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री द्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जय। श्री श्री राम गौरांगी बैंगलोरेश्वर भगवान की जय। श्री श्री जगन्नाथ बलदेव सुभद्रा मई सुदर्शन भगवान की जय। श्री मायापुर धाम की जय। श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय। गंगा माई की जय। यमुना माई की जय। भक्ति देवी की जय। तुलसी देवी की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव की जय। श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय। ग्रंथ श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। ISKCON Vatmana Guru and the Samadhi Bhakti Gaur Premanand Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled bodies. All glories to the assembled bodies. All glories to the assembled bodies. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayamudire Ashtaprayeshu Apatreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Sloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Hare Krishna. Welcome you all to the Tuesday morning Srimad Bhagavatam class. Today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 21, Text 42 and 43. Kadamba Champaka Shokha Karanja Bakulashanaihi Kundamandara Kutajaish Chutapotair Alankritam Karandavai Plavair Hamshai Kurarai Jalakukutaihi Sharashais Chakravakaischa Chakorair Valvupujitam Kadamba Champaka Shoka Karanja Pakulashanai Kundamandara Kutajais Chudapotair Alankritam Karandavai Plavair Hamshai Kurair Jalakukutaihi Sharashais Chakravakaischa Chakorair Valvupujitam Kadamba Champaka Shoka Karanja Pakulashanaihi Kundamandara Kutajais Chutapotair Alankritam Karandavai Plavair Hamshaihi Kurarair Jalakukutaihi Sharasais Chakravakaischa Chakorair Valvupujitam. Translation Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Lake Bindu Sarovara was adjoined by flowering trees such as Kadamba, Champaka, Ashoka, Karanja, Bakula, Asana, Kunda, Mandara, Kutaja, and young mango trees. The air was filled with the pleasing notes of Karandava ducks, plovers, swans, ospreys, waterfowl, cranes, chakravakas, and chakoras. For most of the trees, flowers, fruits, and birds mentioned here as surrounding Bindu Sarovara lake, English synonyms cannot be found. All the trees mentioned are very pious in that they produce a nice aromatic flower such as Champaka, Kadamba, and Bakula. The sweet sounds of waterfowl and cranes made the surrounding area as pleasant as possible and created a very suitable spiritual atmosphere. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuromalitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopishtam Stapitam Ena Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mahyam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Dapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Shakrijatam Sagana Ragunatanditam Tam Sajipam Satvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha Ye Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpade Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostude Taptakan Chanakaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanusate Devi Panamami Haripriye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kapasantubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gauramukta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Moham Karoti Vachalam Pagam Nandi Digram Yakpada Muhammad Shivaram Deadatma Karmanda Madam Shri Chaitanya Ishwara. Hare Krishna. So we see here the translation mentions about this Bindu Sarovara, which was already, I think, discussed in the last two classes. So it's a holy water resort. Now, I will not dwell into that pastime of Bindu Sarovara, but here it mentions about how these Bindu Sarovara are surrounded by nice flowering trees such as Kadamba, Champaka, plus also there were very pleasing sounds of ducks, swans, waterfowl, cranes, and etc. So Srila Prabhupada starts the purport by mentioning that English synonyms cannot be found for most of these. But nevertheless, we go by the names that are given. If you see, actually, even Bhagavad Gita, Srimad, as it is Srimad Bhagavatam, they are all originally from Sanskrit words, but Srila Prabhupada has given the translation and the purports so wonderfully that even those who do not understand English or Hindi or Sanskrit, they have taken to reading and trying to understand Bhagavad Gita as it is and Srimad Bhagavatam. Of course, there are many other books Srila Prabhupada has given. The point is that language is not necessarily required, but the essence of what we discuss is what is required. So here we see that how nice, beautiful flowering trees that give fruits and some pleasant sounds coming from good pious birds and all these things enliven the atmosphere or create a very nice spiritual atmosphere around the Sarovara or this Bindu Sarovara. Now, like this Bindu Sarovara, there are so many places, holy places that have been created or manifested by the Lord through his pastimes. And still, if we see some places are still retaining those atmosphere. But generally, we see that there are two types of atmospheres. One, if you see that the spiritual atmosphere, which this purport talks about, the other one is a material atmosphere. Now, as far as Bindu Sarovara is concerned, there are details even in this third canto as to how Kardamuni actually performed a lot of austerities, and thereafter he got married to Devahuti, and then Devahuti also performed a lot of austerities in the course of trying to serve her husband Kardamuni. And related to this itself, at a later slokas, in one of the slokas, Kardamuni tells Devahuti, actually Devahuti becomes very, very skinny with just bones and these things, because she took so much of austerities to please her husband Kardamuni. So when she had a desire to have children, at that time when she pleased with Kardamuni also wants to satisfy her request. And at that time, in one of the prayers, he says, "My dear Devahuti, you look very much afraid. But first, bathe in Lake Bindu Sarovara created by Lord Vishnu himself, which can grant all the desires of a human being, and then mount this airplane." So, in other words, Kardamuni is telling Devahuti that out of her rendering service to him, she has become very weak. But to regain her original thing, he asked her to take a dip in this Bindu Sarovara, which has been created by none other than Lord Vishnu himself. So that is the power of these holy rivers or holy lakes or holy places, that if one has the right understanding and faith of these places, then definitely, as is the example of Devahuti, will see that she took a bath and then she became enlivened with her original beauty, etc. So it is also mentioned as to how these places can fulfill the desires of all human beings. So that is the importance of these places, because these places are non-different from the Supreme Lord himself. The Lord being absolute truth, he has manifested these places by performing his pastimes. So this Bindu Sarovara has also been manifested by the Lord. Now there are two types of atmospheres that we generally come across. One is a material atmosphere, which we see these days. This material atmosphere is what we see is, if you go out, you will see nothing but cars, trucks, buses, making a lot of sound. You will see people trying to run over you if you try to walk also. But that is not the case. That was not the case even before. People used to go around, and early morning they used to get up, and the first thing they would do is go to the temple, have darshan of the Lord, take some prasadam flower or tulsi or whatever it is, and then come back and then give it to the house members, so that they, if everybody is not been able to go to the temple, at least when the head of the family or a senior family member goes to the temple and comes back and distributes these flowers or this thing, every prasadam, everybody gets the benefit out of it. So this is how in the earlier days, even the cities, this was the practice. So to a certain extent, at least even the temples had that spiritual atmosphere. Now, if you see, if you want to go to a temple also, you have to go through, either you have to go through some vehicle, which is also a big impediment. You don't know when you will be hit by somebody or when you will be hitting somebody. So many uncertainties are there. And if you see the sounds, these days you will find now nothing but the sounds of the horns or people playing some rock music or film music. So many things are there. If you want to go to a temple also, you have to go through so many hurdles these days. You have to travel with a lot of difficulty with uncertainties. Plus, you will hear a lot of unwanted sounds, like maybe a dog howling, or so many things are there. So this is what we see today is a typical material atmosphere, and it's not going to anyway get better. It is only going to degrade itself over a period of time. As we see in the last 20, 30 years itself, so many things have become from bad to worse. Now, even people visiting to holy places these days has become highly commercialized because people want to go there to make some money, not understanding the spiritual value of the potency of the place. So this is how the holy places are today. Whereas if we see, the Lord has given very nice facilities to us by establishing these places. Not only the places, but He has given so many facilities like usage of these flowers and fruits and all these things which are to be meant for utilizing in the service of Lord. Of course, it is not that we cannot use it, but we can use it as prasadam after offering these flowers or fruits to the Lord. Now, the Lord Himself says in Bhagavad Gita, Patram Pushpam Palam Toyam. So, if He says, if one offers me with love and devotion a leaf, a flower, a fruit, or even water, I will accept it. So, the Lord has given it, even if we are prepared to, if we are not in a position to afford anything, but if we are able to take one leaf, and if we are offered to able to give it to the Lord with some love and affection and devotion, the Lord accepts it. But what happens is that we try to exploit all of these by making use of it for our own sense gratification. And that is the reason, if we see, why people are today lusty, greedy, envious, which leads to so many other anarthas in every living entity. And that is why even the trees these days we see, they are not maintained properly. With the result, the fruits are also not uh, proper. They have introduced what is called as genetic modified fruits, for example. One example, earlier the oranges or sweet limes, they used to be having a lot of seeds. So they converted it as a genetically modified, whatever the process is, which I don't know. Whereas these days, if you go and try to buy an orange, you might hardly find one single seed. So this way, the science has advanced to that extent of they have tried to create everything that is available in a way that their purpose is solved. Earlier, we might be able to walk even 5 kilometers, but today we are not able to walk even 500 meters or to walk about a kilometer. So this is what has happened with the advancement of science and technology. Of course, we don't deny science, we don't deny technology, but the point is that everything has to be utilized in service of Krishna, whereas the mundane scientists or the mundane philosophers, they propagate their own theories, and in the process, they try to uh, show something. They want to achieve something also for their own sense gratification. When we say their own sense gratification, that means God is not in the center. Center is them, or center is the others, maybe the audience. So the trees which are supposed to be pious, all these are pious trees. All, if you see these Champaka, Kadamba, they're all very pious trees. Now, pious trees are the ones which give nice flowers, fruits that can be offered to the Lord. And when they are offered to the Lord, they also get the blessings from the Lord, and they continue to offer these things to the living entities for the used in the service of the Lord. But when this purpose is not achieved, but rather turned towards sense gratification, today we might see huge trees, but we might not find the fruits, we might not find the flowers, but we might find the ones that are modified. So even the pious ones today, we don't see these things in the right perspective. Whereas it is said how these flowers, trees, and plants were actually serving the Lord. In the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there is a mention as to how when the Lord appeared, the rivers were actually flowing with clear water. I mean, it's very difficult to find a clear water even in the lakes or the holy places today. If you go to Ganges, people have contaminated it so much, but the Ganges still retains its purity. But people have exploited throwing so much of garbage and dust. But when the Lord appeared, the rivers flowed with very clear water, and the lakes and vast reservoirs were full of lotuses and lilies. So when the Lord was there, all these were still there, but they were very attractive and they were pleasing to the Lord. So the Lord was also pleased. Not only that, in the trees and green plants, they were full of flowers and leaves, pleasing to the eyes. So when the trees are used in the service of the Lord, they look very pleasing also to the living entities. Not only that, the birds like cuckoos and swarms of bees began chanting with sweet voices for the sake of the demigods. That means even the other living entities like the birds, they were all singing, giving nice, beautiful voices, which were very attractive. And then there's a mention of how the peacocks would actually make their sound when they saw aguru incense escaping through the holes of the windows and mistook it for a cloud. That means even the peacocks would be very dancing, seeing after smelling the fragrant smell that was coming out. So Srila Prabhupada mentions in one of the purport that there was so much of incense and fragrant gum burning that the scented fumes were coming out of the windows. So earlier in the houses, they used to burn incense sticks and fragrant gums, which used to be very, very pleasant. And seeing this, the peacocks were attracted and they were dancing. And if we see today, it is not possible to see. Seeing a peacock must be a very, very rare thing in today's life, which you all know. So, but this is how, when the Lord appeared, the trees, the bushes, the flowers, all of them, they were serving the Lord in Dasya Rasa, or with the love of a servant for his master. This was the mood with which they served the Lord. In another reference in Srimad Bhagavatam 5th canto, there is a mention of how on a Kumuda mountain, there is a great banyan tree from which there were hundreds of branches that came out. And from these branches came many roots from which many rivers were flowing. Now, these rivers flow down from the top of the mountain to the northern side of Ilavrita for the benefit of all who live. That means the rivers are also flowing for the benefit of all the living entities. Why? Because it is mentioned that because of these flowing rivers, people have ample supplies of milk, yogurt, honey, clarified butter, molasses, food grains, clothes, bedding, sitting places, and ornaments. And all the objects they desired were supplied for their prosperity, and therefore they were happy. So, in other words, when rivers are flowing very nicely and clearly, it gives very good water and they fulfill the needs of the plants. In turn, the plants give us fruits, flowers. It gives everything. The cows come, they graze, and they give milk, they give yogurt. Then we get ghee from that. So similarly, we get everything that a man requires for his sustenance, by which what was happening was the society was living in prosperity and they were very, very happy. But so in the purport Srila Prabhupada mentions is that the prosperity of humanity does not depend on a demoniac civilization that has no culture and no knowledge, but has only gigantic skyscrapers and huge automobiles rushing down the highways. So we see what a big difference we see in the sense that it's a demoniac civilization because there is no culture and they don't have the right knowledge. So technology has advanced in the form of gigantic skyscrapers and all automobiles. But what has happened is they have become demoniac. Still, it could have been possible if they had utilized everything in the service of the Lord, they would have had a better understanding. So Srila Prabhupada further mentions that the products of nature are sufficient. So whatever the Lord has provided us for our sustenance, they are sufficient for us to sustain. And he says that when there is a profuse supply of milk, food grains, and everything, the residents are actually opulent. That means when we sustain ourselves with whatever nature has provided by the mercy of the Lord, that can make all the living entities opulent. Not only materially, that means also spiritually one can become opulent by utilizing these in the service of the Lord. But unfortunately, because we don't use it, today the society is in a highly disturbed situation and people are not happy. In another place, it is mentioned how the trees and vegetables, and they all give happiness not only in a particular season, but throughout. There is nothing like during Krishna's time also, there was nothing like a season. Like in the month of summer, these flowers will come. In the month of winter, these fruits will come. No, there is nothing like a season. That was the arrangement that was prevailing in Vrindavana. That trees were pleasing and they were pleasing throughout the seasons, nothing like throughout the year. And they were not provided to the industry, they were provided to the living entities for their sustenance. On the other hand, we see when demons like Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyaksha appeared, the lakes and rivers were all agitated. They were not flowing smoothly and they were not clear. And the lotuses that were there in these rivers, they started withering. The flowers start withering over a period of time, not when they are fresh. But when these two demons appeared, what happened was the lotuses started withering. Not only this, there were unfortunate or inauspicious sounds of claps of thunder that were heard without clouds. And the jackals were all yelling, and the dogs were howling, the asses were making their own inauspicious sounds. It is said that when asses and dogs make their sound, it is very inauspicious. But when demons appeared, these were the sounds that were very, very prominent and popular, not the sounds of ducks and swans, which are mentioned in this purport. So another example in this context is when the Parchetas, these are mentioned in the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where it says the King Prachina Barhi asked his sons to go and perform austerities. So when they were going to traveling in the process of performing these austerities, they came across a very nice reservoir of water, which looked very big as an ocean, but the water of this lake was very calm and very quiet. That means in all these places, the water is not agitated, it is calm and quiet. When the water is calm and quiet, what happens is the aquatics, the fishes and other living entities in the water, they are all very, very peaceful and they are all very happy. But today, if you see, none of the waters are calm, not they are clear, and the living entities also struggling. So the purport Srila Prabhupada mentions that the reservoir of water which was seen by the Parchetas was actually a lake, but unlike this sea or ocean which has got turbulent waves, the reservoir was very calm and quiet. The water was so clear, like the mind of some great soul. So the comparison is that when great souls are such that their mind is never disturbed. So the water was so clear that it was like the mind of a great soul. And further, it is mentioned that in that great lake, there are different types of lotus flowers. Some were bluish, some of them were red, some of them grew at night, and some of them in the day. So in such a pleasant atmosphere, what happens is that even the flowers blossom, some blossoming in the night, some blossoming in the day, some coming in different colors, because they were all happy because they were all being served in the service of the Lord. And combined all together, these lotus flowers filled the lake so full that there appeared to be a great mine of such flowers. So that means it appeared as if the whole lake was filled with these lotuses. Today we have to have a struggle to get even one lotus in a off-seasonal time, which we call. But whereas there was no season during those days. Also, there is a mention as to how on the shores of these lakes, there were swans and cranes, chakravakas and karandavas and other beautiful water birds standing about, and they were making nice, beautiful noises. See, when the lakes or holy places are surrounded by beautiful trees, beautiful flowers, and the nice birds that make some very nice auspicious sounds, then they all add to the spiritual value of that particular spiritual place, and thereby that spiritual atmosphere is enlightened or enlivened. Further, it is mentioned that there were bumblebees humming about all about them, and the trees appeared to be very jolly due to the sweet humming of the bumblebees. That means the trees were also becoming happy when these living entities were making nice, beautiful sounds. And all these created an atmosphere as though there was a festival taking place. So, in other words, why we were feeling that happiness when we were visiting these holy places was that there were all these paraphernalia were used in the service of the Lord. And because of that, the trees and plants are also very, very happy. They were giving a lot of nice flowers, which made them also blissful. And it looked like there was a festival going around. So this is how, when we use everything in the service of the Lord becomes happy. The living entities also, like fruits and flowers, they will also be happy. Another mention is that under no circumstances these are to be cut for any sense gratification. Therefore, they had a very long lifespan. And instead, what we see nowadays, all these are used for industrial purposes, for many other usage. In the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, it is mentioned how the trees and the plants, when the Lord was in Vrindavan, they were so in ecstasy when the Lord was passing, when Krishna and Balaram were passing through the Vrindavana forest. They actually offered their obeisances by bending down. So that is how these trees, when offer these things, they used to bend down when the Lord was passing by. So how are we able to see anything these days? No, because if we see today, mostly we find trees or plants with thorns and bushes, which are considered impious, whereas the pious ones are those which give flowering fruits and nice fruits and flowering good fragrant flowers. And further, it is mentioned in India, the mango and jackfruits are very, very prominent, and other places, the mangoes and jackfruit trees, coconut trees, and we see berry trees in other places. But any tree that produces nice fruit for the maintenance and of the people should not be cut at all. And this is the Shastric injunction. That means that any tree that gives nice fragrant flowers and any tree that gives good fruits, they should never be cut for whatever the reason. This is what is the Shastric injunction. Another nice quote that is there in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where the Lord in his teachings to Uddhava is telling how all the living entities achieved perfection during his presence, and not only by his presence, but also by the association of his devotees. That is, mentions that the inhabitants of Vrindavana, including the gopis, cows, unmoving creatures like trees, animals, living entities with stunted consciousness such as bushes and thickets and snakes, all achieve perfection of life by unalloyed love for me, and thus very easily achieved me. That means all the living entities, there's all the living entities so-called, which is mentioned in the translation, they will all achieve perfection. Even the trees, bushes, hills. For example, Govardhana hill, the Lord performed the Govardhana pastime, which we celebrated a few days back. So the Lord is telling in one of the places that, my dear Baladeva, just see how the trees are bowing down with their branches and offering obeisances to your lotus feet, which are worshipable even by the demigods. Indeed, my dear brother, you are the supreme God, and these trees have produced fruits and flowers as an offering to you. So those days, the trees were rendering service by offering the fruits and flowers to them. And further, it says that although a living entity takes birth as a tree due to the mode of ignorance, certainly by such a birth in Vrindavana, these trees are destroying all the darkness in their life by serving your lotus feet. So we are all full of darkness, but when we render service to the Lord, we are brought into the mode of knowledge, and we don't live in the ignorance. Similarly, not only the Lord, it's further mentioned how even when the devotees of the Lord partake pastimes in these holy places, even then the Lord is very, very pleased. And if you see in the Esther years, the rishis used to go and stay on the banks of these rivers. Like we see in this case itself, Kardamuni performed tapasya around this Bindu Sarovar. So all these rishis, saints, and great personalities, they used to go and perform their tapasya in these holy places, which retained the opulence of spirituality. So that is how they rendered service to the Lord. And in the process, the Lord was happy. The rishis and saints being rendering service to the Lord, they were happy. And also all these living entities, they were happy, and all these living entities were also delivered. In one of the places, it is mentioned how a saintly person actually goes and he teaches a lesson by performing their tapasya in these places. It is said that as a perfect person, one should learn from a tree how to dedicate himself to the cause of others. Like these trees give flowers and fruits for the other living entities. Similarly, one should learn from these living entities how they should be serving the other living entities and live for the welfare of others. And in spite of all these things, many times the trees are cut, but they don't agitate. Similarly, if we look at lessons that we can learn, that we should not become agitated when we are being disturbed. Now, in many instances, even we see in the 10th canto how mentioned that the trees and plants, they used to provide shelter to the Lord, and they even provide shelter even today. But unfortunately, because the trees are not pious, we may not be able to get the shelter that is required. So all these wonderful atmosphere surcharged by beautiful flowers, trees, fruits, and surrounded by auspicious birds like ducks and swans, they add value to the spiritual life. Whereas what has happened is that we see the contradictory thing where fruits are modified, the flowers don't give the fragrant smell anymore. And not only that, we see the sounds of inauspiciousness all around. So this is what I have for the class today. So I can take some questions for the next few minutes if you have, or any comments that you have on today's subject. Anybody? Hare Krishna Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Thank you very much. But I don't have any question right now.
So can I take the class as closed, Mataji?
Yes.
Okay, Mataji. Thank you all very much. Grantha Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you.